This is The Second Studio, hosted by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Bordero-Nay. This week, our guest is Drew Lang.
Drew is the founder of Lang Studio, an architecture office based in New York City, as well as the founder of Brick and Wonder, which is a networking community for architects and other professionals in the construction and architecture field. They're based in New York, but they also operate in other cities, such as San Francisco, London, and I think Austin, Texas.
Yes, absolutely. And they're probably going to expand. With Drew, we talk about how he became interested in architecture, his practice, but we also talk mostly about Brick and Wonder, what they do, why it was started, how it's been helpful for him and the members as part of it, the profession of architecture, the struggles of the profession of architecture, and what they're doing to address those. Sponsors.
One of the best tools we found for specification and project management is Programma, an outstanding all-in-one suite designed specifically for interior designers. With Programma, you can create schedules, mood boards, and invoices and share all your project information with contractors and clients through the convenient client dashboard. Projects can get complicated, but Programma simplifies everything, saving you time so you can focus on design. Start thriving with Programma by tapping the link in our episode notes and use the code SECONDSTUDIO to save 25% on your annual subscription. Would you like to get as-built faster?
Yes.
Okay. IPX has you covered. IPX lets you seamlessly transform laser scans into LOD 300 BIM and CAD files. Whether you've got your 3D scans already or need the full laser scanning service, IPX offers instant pricing and order tracking for scan-to-BIM services on any project, no matter the size or complexity. Once a building scan is complete, IPX delivers detailed BIM, CAD, 360 virtual tours, and material takeoffs in their platform, where you can view, share, export, query, and quantify areas, floors, and materials. Check out the IPX link in our show notes.
Revit users, you have access to a powerful new capability you might not know about. Available with Revit version 2023.1 onward, Autodesk Insight is a next-generation carbon analysis tool that can help you make the leap toward low-carbon design. With only a few clicks, Insight lets you analyze, understand, and track the embodied and operational carbon impact of your design choices. You can then visualize opportunities for energy efficiency and carbon mitigation with its flexible dashboards, helping you make more sustainable and informed decisions. Check out the Insight link in our show notes to learn more. This is The Second Studio with myself, Marina, and our guest, Drew Lang. Here we go.
I grew up in New Orleans and lived there until I was 18 and went away to college. In New Orleans, super formative for me. I still think of it as home, even though I've never lived back there since moving away. I always find a way to stay closely connected. I didn't know when I left New Orleans that I was going to become an architect. But it turns out that a lot of my influence, the setting, even the people, family, and so forth were of course influential. I mean, how can it not be? And I still very much have let's say mixed feelings about New Orleans, as one does with most places that are charged. Where you grow up, how could it not be charged? And it's on the romantic side of it, there's the inspiration of the landscape and the way the built environment exists in this very dominant natural environment, right? And we saw that play out in Katrina in a way that the whole world could see. I saw it every day. You literally see the buildings being taken over by the landscape. And most blocks, I would say, anytime a building's been left untended, then, the landscape does its thing and goes crazy and takes over completely. And it's, as beautiful as it is, it's not a comfortable way for humans to exist. And so, I don't know, that tension is super fascinating to me and beautiful and inspiring. So yeah. And I'm sorry.
When you say the landscape taking over, so I've not been to New Orleans, although it's been on my list for quite some times. Do you mean that the growth of nature is rapid and quickly takes over the built environment if left
Exactly.
untamed?
Exactly. So, throughout the city, we have old growth oak trees, mature oak trees. They're stunning, and they're works of art. Important structures in and of themselves, and everywhere you look, there they are. Um, and the root system grows in a way where it comes up through the sidewalks and the streets, and literally, and
Hmm.
and so it's not just grass growing through the seams of the sidewalk like one is used to seeing in many places. It's completely um, buckled, dismantled
I see.
sidewalks and streets, um, fences, front yards, what have you. Um, I mean, that's just one example, right? But yes, vegetation, I mean, of course, it's a tropical environment and things grow. Things are just meant to grow. Things thrive, natural things, planted things, the indigenous plants, and the non-indigenous ones. The weeds like it there too. I mean, anything that's green and grows kind of likes it there, which is great, except makes it a hard place to live.
Yeah, okay. That's something I never thought about. And then you said that when you left New Orleans at the age of 18, you didn't know that you were going to be an architect, but the usual kind of American track is, sometime when you're in high school, around the age of 16, 17, you're kind of forced to choose what you're going to study. So talk about that transition. And did you go straight from New Orleans to New York City at the age of 18?
No, I didn't. I moved at that time to Middlebury, Vermont. I went to Middlebury College. Um, it's because the college where I chose to go, I really wasn't forced to choose my profession, and did a general course of study, a liberal arts course of study, and studied literature, studied comparative literature. And I mean, I didn't even take any studio art. It wasn't until my senior year that the interest started to develop in architecture, and then it was too late to register for an art history course, so I just audited an art history course that was co-taught by an architectural historian. About a third of the course wove in architectural history, and anyway, after that I was on my way. But I would say before that, of course, you're college age, and you're thinking about the future. And as I did that, I did take coursework where I was able to, I don't know, in some ways feel out what I wanted to do. And the distinct thing I remember about this, and it was freshman year, first semester, I took an economics course because I thought, like, I'm interested in business. I've always been interested in business. I thought, well, that might be a direction I go in. And I can't remember if it was microeconomics or macroeconomics, one of those that you're required to take before you take any advanced coursework. And it was so awful. I mean, the teacher was just dreadful, so it didn't help. But it was also that, like, I looked around the room, and all of the people in this classroom were people who I just didn't want to be, if you know what I mean. Like that, I just couldn't. I was like, I don't know, something about the feeling in this room is just not right. And like that was the end of that. But it was for me a roundabout path to get to architecture school. It wasn't until 3 years after college that I actually made my way to architecture school.
So it was the art history course. So what was there one thing that occurred that you saw that piqued your interest in architecture? Was it one of those courses, the art history course, or was it something else? Like, how did you go from lit to architecture?
Yeah. I mean, it definitely wasn't a straight path. I mean, I guess in some sense, studying literature had something to do with the decision, but it was only one data point, one point of experience. It really mostly had to do with a combination of things I experienced in my life and like being forced at that juncture in my life, which of course is a fortunate thing. I mean, I'm glad there's that structure where, okay, I'm in college, I better figure out what I'm going to do. And so, I went through this thought exercise over a period of time around all the things that were meaningful to me, where I felt like I could carve out um, a, a, a career, a professional path, and that's how I arrived at architecture. It's and then, I mean, I can talk more about that, although I don't know how interesting it is. So, you know, I'll leave that to you. It's sort of hard for me to know. I'm talking about these things, so you tell me. But it's. I had to go out and test this and see if, in fact, I was interested in architecture. And so, in order to have a different experience in a different place, I moved out to Los Angeles after architecture
Really?
school. And I signed up for a studio course at SciArc. And it was really there, and all the experiences I had there at SciArc over about a 2-month period of an intensive studio course that seeded things for me in a real way. Like I started to understand what architecture was and could be for me. And I mean, I got the bug. I was inspired. I mean, they took us to all sorts of places that, I didn't know existed, whether it was, the Schindler House or, Louis Kahn's Salk Institute, La Jolla, and I was like, this is just a different sort of cathedral, and this is the kind of cathedral where I want to be, I mean, I was like, wow,
Yeah.
and I mean, there was a lot more to it than that. The exercise of making things with my hands, and thinking through the combination of concepts and aspects of functionality. It was just, I just got very excited about it very quickly in the way that we all do, when we get into architecture. And I've been lucky enough to, as I've made way through the profession, hold on to that passion by the hardest. It's, I'd say that's one of the biggest problems we all face in the industry is holding on to that passion that we initially felt when we got into this. And I mean, I really appreciate what you guys are doing with your podcast and, in a sense, trying to help solve the problems that we all experience as architects and creative professionals, because so much of it is about this place of inspiration and awe where we want to exist as much as we can and coexisting with all the, difficult realities that we have to contend with at the same time can very easily take us away from those places in a way where we never come back to them. And sadly, I see, many friends and colleagues succumbing, in a sense, to the harsh realities of the world and not making their way back to a place of passion. And I think it's so important that we all come together. And I really appreciate the kind of environment that you're creating with this podcast for us to do that.
Well, we're trying. We try to make it comfortable. But let's talk about that. So for the listeners, what are some reasons or examples of architects not able to be in that place of being inspired and creating things that are inspiring, and the awe and that kind of emotion, that aspect of it? Like, why, for the layperson, like, why would that not exist for an architect? Why would that disappear?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, like, where do you want to?
How much time do we have to talk?
Yeah, I mean, where do you want to start and end? I mean, it's. I mean, look, on the one hand, it's all of the obvious things. Clients, and their interests, and the fact that it's quite difficult to just by the nature of the way we work with clients to come into alignment with them where their vision matches ours. And it's can be this wonderful kind of dance, and there can be a positive tension there, if you will, where you really grow with each other as you push each other. And I think oftentimes when it doesn't work out for people that aren't able to get there, they're able to overcome the challenges that clients inherently present when they come to architects with projects. There's also just, let's say, the people and the business from an internal operations standpoint. It's just by its nature very, very hard to combine creative endeavors with business endeavors, financial interests with interests of creativity and passion. And I personally find those two things coming together, the two sides of what we do, really, really interesting. And it's actually one of the things that drew me to architecture in the first place. The fact that it's a fundamental social endeavor. We do it with people, we do it for people, in places, and but some people get beaten down by all these challenges that become problems for them, overwhelming problems. And look, it's I think the answer actually lies in community, if you will, right? And again, back to what you're doing with the podcast. It's about coming together with others, including peers. I think it's really, really important to always come back together with peers, and trying to find that place of passion and awe together, and encourage and inspire each other, and lift each other up. It's like that's for me, I see it. It's become really core to the way I practice architecture. And we started another company inside of our architecture studio called Brick and Wonder, which is a professional community, because I found that doing it in smaller circles, this kind of outreach and engagement with colleagues, professional colleagues, was too limited. As much as I reached out to people I knew, I couldn't break through the silos. And I wanted to break through not just the silos within architecture itself and, the immediately adjacent aspects of the profession, like construction, but beyond that, really to all aspects of the built environment. And so, for me, it's, I've been able to sustain my energy and passion for architecture by going outside of architecture and coming back in constantly, and doing so primarily with colleagues, including architects, but extending well beyond just architecture to really all of the professionals who touch the built environment.
Yeah, it's I like all of those points to what you said earlier about the potential challenges of working with clients. It's some of those things are inherent to the process, right? Because these projects take a long time. If you're working, let's say, with a client and it's their house, which is a very personal thing, that's another layer to the mix. And commercial stuff also has plenty of its own kind of challenges in a very different way. And now, you're involving a bunch of people who probably haven't worked together to do something creative that they care about, and it's very expensive. It takes a long time. There's just like a lot of things there that make...
Doesn't sound like a good idea.
It's tough from the outset, but I think sort of to your point, right? That's the that's one of the most important things, is finding the good alignment between client and architect. And it's never necessarily, it's very rare for it to be a perfect match. But there definitely does need to be enough alignment for it to work. Because if there's not, then there's really nothing anyone can do, even if on both sides, we're both good people, we both want to work with each other, we're both kind, all of that stuff. But if there's a fundamental misalignment in the objectives of the project or the expectations, nothing works. And that's one of the hardest parts I find is figuring out when it does make sense to work with somebody and when it doesn't, whether that person be an architect and I'm the client, or the roles are reversed.
Yeah. Do you have a process that you engage to try and figure that out with clients and other important collaborators?
I have a special tinfoil hat that I put on to try and figure. No, I mean, there's just the fundamentals, right? I mean, we try to have a fair amount of conversations with people before we decide that we should sign with them, and the same for them. We sometimes will initiate a little bit of work that's, where they're paying us to do something, but we haven't signed for the full contract yet. And it allows people, it's more of a psychological thing, to be honest. It allows them to feel like we can kind of go on a few test dates, first few dates, and see how it goes, and then commit. So those things we do, but it's I think a lot of it's just learning how to read people and also having references. Like, usually I've kind of found, and I'd be curious to hear if this was the case for you, that if we have a really good client, meaning they're a good person, easy to work with, an adult, and a mature adult, it tends to be that the people they refer us to are also more likely to be like that. Versus bad clients, when they refer another person, I'm a bit more skeptical of that referral.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen a good bit of what you're describing, and I've seen it work the other way around. I think there's alignment, but there's also there's this notion of accountability. Like, we have to be accountable to our clients and their interests, and they have to be accountable to us. One of the things that I found to be extremely helpful is to make it clear to clients in how they need to be accountable to us. In other words, what are the requirements for them, and to hold them to that. It's something it's very, very hard to do, especially early in one's career. As I've done this more and more, it becomes increasingly easier. It's never easy, but it's the case every time. I mean, without fail, that if I don't do that, that things go awry. Things begin to veer out of alignment, and we may be aligned at our core, but there's so many factors that we all experience in a project, especially once it's gone into construction, and the lead role transfers from us as architects over to the building team, and our focus isn't there in the same way. It's very hard to lose track of what everyone's role is, and what people are responsible for doing. And I think it is, and I didn't know this, no one told me this, I had to figure it out the hard way. I didn't understand that it's part of our job to guide the client, including telling them what they need to do, what they're required to do to fulfill their commitments. Yeah, is there,
So what are the things, you must have some kind of list. So what are the things that you inform the client of at the outset of the project, or maybe, before a big phase starts?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing, the overarching thing is communication. I mean, it all comes back to that. Um, Regular communication, being available, um, and and if a client can't be available themselves, to make someone who can represent them and their interests and make decisions for them available.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I think almost no matter what it is, David, it comes back to communication. Um, I mean, whether it's an issue of payment, whether it's to do with a design decision, whether it's to do with um, getting to, let's say, clarity, programmatic clarity, budget clarity, schedule clarity. I mean, all the hot button issues. It's our job to ask the right questions and to draw the client out and to explain to them why it's important to be having conversations about these things, and not just once. I mean, I mean, how many times have we all had clients come back to us and say things like, I told you our budget was this, um, and, and of course we're thinking in the back of our minds, well, then why did you keep asking me for more and more and more as you watched the budget go up and up and up and not saying anything until now? Except that, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? And if the client is going to, blow up, we all know what that looks like, and none of us want to experience it. Then it's our job to be proactive and stay, many, many steps ahead. I, um, I've worked in studios. I've run my own studio for way too long, where I don't do that. I mean, I've made the mistake so many times. I continue to make the mistake, in all honesty, and I mean, conversations like this are good, because like any reminder to do this is just super helpful, because it's obvious as it seems. It's so hard to do, so hard to do, because it's we're just wired in a way where we want to focus on design. We want to focus on the things that are most important to us. But in order to be able to execute on aspects of design that we want to execute, realize projects, build projects in the way that we want to build them, there are lots of other things that we have to do, and it all comes back to communication. Do you think there's anything else that's core to this set of problems other than communication?
No, I mean, communication is the biggest one. I like your last point, though, that it's. I have a list, scattered notes of things that to do and things to avoid doing in the process of an entire project. And you're right, it is hard to remember them because the list is ever growing, and the aspect of I guess you call it client management, or client keeping them up to date and informed, and letting them know kind of really obvious things that would be obvious to an architect, but letting the client know before they happen it's a good point. That's something that we are always thinking about as well, and it's hard to do because I think especially when you're a smaller practice, because the number of things that the average architect is thinking about in the middle of a project, there's like 100 things we're thinking about already that have nothing to do with how the client's feeling, right? And it's like, we need to move this forward, so I'm going to focus on the project. I'm going to focus on the stuff that I have to focus on because I want to and I need to in order for us to get to this point. And it's very easy for all of us, I think, to forget about the center person who's right there. They're the client that you see pretty often, but forget that they don't know anything about this process more often than not. They potentially never worked with an architect, or it was a long time ago and things were different or whatnot. And you're dealing with someone who's a complete novice and is, again, spending a lot of money. And so they would want to be informed. And it's just human nature also, I found, where people, when they have questions, they don't ask questions. And we can sit back and kind of like you said, and just expect them to ask questions and be angry and say, why didn't you ask me this 2 months ago or 6 months ago? But as you said, at the end of the day, that doesn't really do anything, right? So it's actually, the way I view it is that it is our responsibility to be proactive. That's the only kind of mental direction I can take that would be useful, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like we're aligned on this.
But the vetting of clients is difficult. I think the other thing I'll say is, because I know you do residential work, is seeing how the partners, if there's partners involved, husband and wife or whatever combination of, how they interact is also very important for me. If they're not cool with each other, then I don't like that. Just like I don't like seeing that. It makes me very uncomfortable. But also I know that it's going to be a problem at some point in the project. It'll escalate to where it'll be an issue, versus when we have couples we work with who are just like nice to each other.
Yeah, you don't want to divorce in the middle of designing a house. That's not fun.
I bet the cost for divorces and remodels and new construction, it's somewhere, it's in that list for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, right. It's best case scenario is we're taking partners that we're working with on a residential project, and by virtue of the engagement, we're helping to bring them closer together. But it's that's not a given. If people are coming to us and things are broken between them, then needless to say, it makes the process quite difficult. So
but if they finish the house, it'll fix the marriage. That's that.
You can put drywall between them. It might bring them back together.
I mean, it's not. You also can't expect two people to, collaborate perfectly when they've never done a creative project together. And a lot of couples, they're not necessarily in the same profession, and they aren't working together. Like their personal lives together happens from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. 5 days a week and the weekends. But then working on a project that is stressful is a completely different thing. So for us, at least, and for me, as long as the people we're working with are just respectful of everybody, including the people they live with, that's enough. If someone wants to say we're drawing a boundary, you have full control, it's fine with me, then that's we can do it that way too. You don't need to be collaborating on everything, but people just need to be respectful. And again, as things become stressful, that is when we find out the threshold of respect that's actually there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going to what you're saying about community, though, I thought that was really interesting and smart. And what you've done also with the platform, Brick and Wonder, which we should talk about, is smart as well. But I liked your take because it sort of reminded me also that with the inherent challenges of doing architecture, I do think there are a lot of architects, and maybe even architects of a slightly older generation, who over the course of their career became very frustrated for the reasons we've talked about, and then the many, many more that exist. And I think, especially in small practices, that frustration can kind of just, what's the word, fester, in part because they don't actually like talk to enough people. Like as simple as that. They don't talk to someone about the issues, kind of like
Just
therapy
become
or
bitter.
depression or anything else.
Yeah.
They don't talk to other folks who are in the foxhole with them, or someone else that's in a related industry or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, we all have problems, as a matter of course. Business problems interwoven with personal problems, and they're all intertwined. And whether, no matter what kind of business you are, you have, what we think of as people problems. Those problems are fundamental. And it could be a people problem, because you just don't have the right person to talk to in order to solve the problem that you're trying to solve. I mean, whether it's that you need a specialist, a consultant to help inform you about some aspect of your project where you don't have the expertise, or, you're experiencing growth in a way that doesn't match up with your team, and you're having
Mm-hmm.
a hiring problem, you're having internal operations problems, I mean, kind of go on and on, but um, it's the way we look at it is that if we can, in essence, gather, curate, select, hone um, a, a special, a thoughtful, a sensitive, a talented group of professionals who work across the built environment, then everybody is very well served, and everyone's problems start to dissipate
Yeah.
because you have ready solutions at
Mm-hmm.
hand.
Mm-hmm.
Just a phone call away, a warm introduction away. However you're going to come together with them, you're part of the same community in Brick and Wonder. That's how we think of it. And look, it's networking, but networking of a different sort. And of course, we all have negative associations with networking. We're trying to abandon that, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and we're having some good success with it, where people come into what we're doing and they feel good. There's a feeling of warmth. There's a feeling of being welcomed, and there's an understanding that people are there to help you, to help prop you up, and ultimately it is about helping people grow their businesses where they want to grow them, and get new business and do project collaborations with the kind of people that they want to collaborate with, and this in the final analysis, of course, has to include the clients, but it's our view that it actually begins with the professionals, because it's the professionals that we turn to time and time and time again. We're the ones who always operate together in the same space. And real estate, everything that sits in the built environment and the natural environment that coexists with it, is cyclical. Everything comes back around to where it started. A property that gets sold, then gets improved, and all sorts of things kind of come in and out of the building that gets built there, and then it's all of the kind of construction folks, all the materials, all of the design professionals, the creativity that's going into what that is, the value creation, and so forth, and all the business minds, if you will, working alongside them as they do it, be it the attorneys or the insurance specialists or
Yeah.
mortgage specialists, lenders. It's and then back through to the other side, the where you're marketing it, and photographing it, and styling it, and then selling it, and it's on to the next cycle, and it's we're very, very intent on embracing every aspect of the people and the kind of activities that engage the built environment, and everybody has different ways of looking at the built environment, because everyone comes to it in a slightly different way, and it's really opened things up. It's opened up people's kind of existence, the way that they think of what they're doing, and the possibilities for themselves, even the possibility of crossing over into another profession in a way where you can straddle your core profession, your primary profession, and then maybe do something else at the same time, for whatever reason, because it augments your business, or because it helps fuel your passion. But yeah, that's a little bit about the Brick and Wonder dynamic.
The point you brought up of kind of the full life cycle of a building or a property, and then that cycle repeating over time is also interesting, because I think architects, we think of ourselves as being experts of buildings. Let's say designing buildings specifically, understanding roughly how they're put together enough at least. But there's many more aspects to what happens with a piece of property, and many other professionals that are involved outside of an architect's kind of lane. And what's funny is that when you think about it, actually, for the for most clients, their perspective is actually more of what you described, because they engage with all of those half a dozen different professionals, and they have to understand a little bit about all of these things, about the lending, about the real estate agent, about the inspector, about all of this stuff. And architects are actually, in terms of a raw list of people, just one piece of it. And I do think as architects, having an understanding of everyone else is, if anything, it's extremely beneficial, because that means also we understand the clients we're working with better, because that's their perspective is that.
Yeah, it's very empowering. And as you're saying, it's not just helpful to us, it ends up being helpful to our clients, and ends up being helpful in the engagement of our collaborations.
And now a quick break to thank the sponsors who support the Second Studio. We are supported by Enscape. Enscape is a real-time visualization and VR tool for the AEC industry. It is also a program that we use in our office. And we like it because, one, it's a plugin and not a separate application, which means we can work natively in our modeling programs such as Revit, SketchUp, Rhino, ArchiCAD, or Vectorworks. Two, it's super easy and versatile. We've used many other rendering programs, and a lot of times they're just difficult to use. That's not the case with Enscape. We can do renderings, 360-degree panoramas, videos, and immersive VR experiences with a breeze. Thirdly, it renders in real time, so we can see the light, shadows, and materials of the renderings as we're working. So start your free trial today by clicking the Enscape 3D link in our show notes.
One of the easiest ways to get accurate existing condition drawings for houses is with an iPhone or an iPad app called Canvas. Canvas is a tool we use on many of our projects. Instead of surveying a home manually, we simply scan it using our iPad, and Canvas processes the scan to produce accurate drawings and even 3D computer models. The file format works with AutoCAD, Revit, ArchiCAD, Vectorworks, SketchUp, and others. It is extremely easy to use, fast, and really has been a huge benefit for us and our clients. Try it out by visiting canvas.io/SSP and get your first as-built free.
Yeah, so talking about brick and mortar, taking a step back. So for folks who don't, what?
Brick and mortar.
Brick and mortar. I knew I was going to say that in the recording. Before this recording, I'm like, I'm going to say brick and mortar at some point.
Everyone does it. Everyone does it. Yeah,
I don't feel so bad. Brick and wonder. For folks who don't know what it is at all, so it's a network, it's a group, it's a community you can be part of as someone who's related to these all the industries you discussed. What happens though? Do you guys meet up in person? Is there an email thread? What is the activity?
Well, just to back up for a moment before I get into that, I'll tell you where we are physically, geographically, operating currently. And also I'll tell you that the vision is for it to evolve in a way where it becomes a global community. And in its current form, we've been operating for about 5 years. We're over 300 members currently, primarily in New York, where we started. We're now operational in San Francisco, Austin, Texas, and in London.
Austin, Texas. Okay.
Austin, Texas. Yeah, I mean, I can explain in a bit why Austin and why these other places and not some of the other places that you might be imagining will go. The growth is organic, but I can get to that in a minute. That there are different aspects of the community engagement. There is a digital presence that we have in the form of a private online community. Think of it as our own private LinkedIn. At the moment, we license that software from a third party and white label it, to appear as our own. All of our members can see one another in that space, in that digital space. There's a community feed that's kind of a running feed that people interact with. They're going in there to make requests. We announce new members in there. Things like this. It's just kind of the running news feed and discussion feed, out of that place and in other places within the online community, people can, of course, message privately with each other and things like that. One of the most important things that people do in there is they see all of our upcoming events. There's a calendar of events in there, and people RSVP for those events, and each member has visibility as to who is signed up for these various events, which is quite helpful. Our core event that we do every month is our roundtable event. It's an in-person roundtable discussion that engages one topic that's both general enough that it applies to everybody across our community, but specific enough in a way where we know it's something that's a real problem or challenge, or something of interest to all of our community members. So there's a filter through which we design those discussions, and they are guided discussions. We have a very specific format for them. They last an hour and a half. There's a short period of socializing beforehand and afterwards, but we move quite quickly to the roundtable engagement where we're sitting together. It's generally 15 to 25 of our members
Nice.
in each of those. So it remains intimate and everyone speaks, everyone participates. We do other in-person engagements, including site tours. We arrange access to special places that people usually know about, but either can't or don't for some reason access themselves. That's the way we curate that aspect of the programming. We have some online events as well that we conduct by Zoom, and of course, when those occur, any member from anywhere in the world can tune in. And then we have larger social gatherings of different sorts. For our upper tier of membership, we do 2 sit-down dinners a year. And for the middle tier, there special series of cocktail gatherings. And for the whole of the community, it includes all 3 tiers of membership. They're larger social gatherings that occur twice a year. So there are different ways that people come together. The third prong of the community engagement is one-on-one. And, ultimately, that's the place that people want to get to. Giving them different pathways to arrive at that place. The in-person events kind of allow them to connect with each other and then kind of go off on their own and have separate conversations and engage with each other. Sometimes just as colleagues who are supporting each other, oftentimes hiring each other onto projects, tapping each other for project collaborations, or starting new initiatives, kind of entrepreneurial initiatives together with one another. I'm just coming from looking at a property myself with a contractor I've become very close to, having met through Brick and Wonder. We looked at a property in New York City that we're looking at buying and developing. I do some real estate development work as well as practice architecture and participate in the Brick and Wonder community. So, it's interestingly, I had never previously considered doing development work in New York City because it's so intimidating. The development work that I've done historically has been either in New Orleans or outside of New York City, in upstate New York, in rural area. So, diving into something in New York City, I feel kind of empowered to do it. I feel inspired to do it. I feel so much more comfortable doing it together with my trusted colleague, who I've met through the Brick and Wonder community. And that's what it's designed for. And people are doing that every day. We have currently 3 full-time staff members in New York, and their primary job is to connect with and serve the community members, and very specifically introduce them to each other. So it's this kind of curated matchmaking, if you will, that's very geared towards people's growth, specifically the way that they want to grow, and and usually having to do with some aspect of business development. I mean, a core problem, of course, that people, no matter what size business they are, have is getting new business. And then, we extend that beyond just getting new business in order to survive to, getting the kind of business that you want to get with the people that you want to work with. Because it's for us, it always comes back to that. It always comes back to the people, the quality of the person, broadly defined in relation to their values, their behaviors, their talents, what they have to offer others, right? Like you have to apply to get into the Brick and Wonder community. And
I was just going to ask.
Yeah, so happy to tell you how that works. Most people come to us through existing members. Anyone's welcome to apply and do so through our website. The more people can tell us about themselves, the better. We can immediately discern whether someone may be a fit, right? We of course don't know until we know. We have to go through the process of vetting them. And the vetting process has to do with assessing someone's values. Do their values align with the Brick and Wonder values? I can get back to that. And the second thing is, are they someone who very much believes in and is positioned to step into the Brick and Wonder community in a way where they extend value to other people, and they're open to receiving value from other people, right? Because it's in that give and take that people thrive, and that's what everyone wants. And it begins with people and relationships. Whenever someone comes to us and they want to begin with the ROI, the return on investment, what's in it for me, how do I get new business? How do I sell this and that? They're not a fit, because of course everyone wants to get to that. That's what everyone wants. It's a given. The pathway to that, we look at it in a very, very specific way. We take the long view. We want people coming into Brick and Wonder who embrace the long view, who believe in making an investment simultaneously in themselves and in others and in the community that maps to the future that they want to have, the professional and the personal future, because of course we spend so much of our time working. We want to have a good time doing it. And so in that sense, joy is critical to our engagement and our value set, getting to a place of joy, and the place of wonder. That's why wonder comes into the picture. Another way of saying awe or inspiration, right? And that's core to it. And in mindset, at least an openness to a certain kind of mindset, it's not natural for a lot of people, but we can sense if someone is open to kind of arriving at a mindset of abundance rather than a mindset of scarcity, a mindset of, give and take, a mindset of, positive competition, right? Because we have people in the community who are by definition competitors with one another. But for it to work, and we filter for this, people need to be open to the notion of positive engagement, positive competition, positive, collaboration with competitors where they help one another because there's an abundance of opportunity more than, any one of us can do. And, all of these things together become the meaningful differentiator. And, create a pathway, a long one, mind you. It's not a short path to travel. It's a long one. But look, what we all do,
It takes a long time
it takes
anyway.
a long time anyway. So like, what's the
Yeah.
hurry?
Yeah.
It's easy for me to say that because people who own businesses have to make payroll, and payroll is coming in 2 weeks, so it's an interesting kind of circular conversation, right? Because you come back to the real problems that are the near-term problems. I think the payroll problem is the one that people can relate to most. For those of us who run businesses, and most people, as it stands now, who are part of Brick and Wonder, either own or operate their own businesses, or they are senior team members in their businesses, whereby they're responsible for the business. They're not just responsible for the work that the business does. And so it's a lot of responsibility that we all have, and it's anyway, it's interesting. But happy to go back into anything that I told you about that you may want to know more about. Okay.
Well, I think the larger points of what you said, I certainly agree with. I think I can't recall if we chatted either before we started recording or afterwards, but there's obviously some alignment between what we're doing with this and then your intentions with Brick and Wonder. It's the satisfying short-term needs to meet payroll and other things like that it's an interesting, kind of a difference between the short term and long term. I think I agree. Any form of networking, it generally takes time. I mean, yes, there are stories we hear of someone meets someone randomly and then they have a project they get the next day. Yes, that does happen. But if you,
but not for the majority.
It's not the majority. If you have that mentality that you're going to step into some space, Brick and Wonder or whatever of an event or something else, and then that's going to be what you need in order for you to feel like you've gotten something out of it, that's the wrong mentality. I think it is a long game. I think it's a game of planting seeds and then seeing whether or not those seeds sprout 1, 2, 5 years later, 10 years later. I think the mistake that architects make is once some of those longer term relationships and schedules start to pay off with projects, it's very easy for an architecture office to become complacent in the effort of networking and marketing and all that kind of icky stuff that kind of traditionally architects have kind of poo-pooed on. But that's when you run into problems, right? Because then at some point the projects do run out, it will happen. And now because you haven't been maintaining your communications with people, now you're kind of sort of back to square one, and now you're at a point where even if you've had a practice for 20 years and you had a fair amount of success, you're now in a moment in this week. Now I need work in the next 2 weeks to feed my staff, and that's I don't know where I was going with that, but that seems to be another thing that I've seen, a mistake, I guess you could say, of kind of not being consistent over the long term and just kind of getting what you need and then bouncing. And I'm done with network. I'm done with talking to people. I've got my few projects. I don't need to think about it anymore, which is not a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's the short-term problems are real problems.
Yeah.
We all have to step into those, like it or not. And I mean, generally, our experience with the Brick and Wonder communities, we see we're actually able to help solve people's short-term problems quite well. The exception is new business, revenue generation. There's I mean, of course, there are examples of someone scrambling to find a photographer to document a project in a window of time, and the usual go-to photographer isn't available, and they need another one, and they come to us, and that's a quick win-win. Those great, chop that win up, but it's not nearly the most meaningful sort of engagement or win. needless to say, right? I mean, look, of course, people can meet one another and start their relationship that way, just as a matter of timing, and then go off to develop an incredible relationship and, long-term engagement and series of collaborations, right? And we have seen that happen, but, of course, the problem is it doesn't work if people come to the Burton Wonder community expecting that. It quickly falls apart. If that's the way everyone's kind of operating from the outset, it falls apart. Value set goes to pieces. So, yeah. I mean, we're not denying this reality. We're just saying, yeah, we get it, but the solution, this particular problem, isn't one that can be solved in the short term. I mean, at some point, you will be in a place where you no longer have the short-term problem. It's just going to take a little while to get there, So, yeah.
That's always the challenge. Go ahead.
No, I wanted to go back to the kind of like the geography where Brick and Wonder kind of operates. You mentioned New York City, Austin, San Francisco, and London, and you also mentioned maybe some places where it wouldn't operate. So can we kind of touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's anywhere that wouldn't operate other than to say it doesn't make sense to do so right now. So, for instance, we have members who've been active with us in the Philadelphia area from the very beginning. And there's something of a, vibrant group of people there who could begin to gather. And actually, our team anticipated that we would start Philadelphia among the first group of cities, but just had turned out that way. And the reason why we've started the satellite cities where we have is because there was at least one person in that location who was well positioned to take on kind of the role of leading the community in that location. So it's actually members in these locations rather than Brick and Wonder employees who are leading these groups. The Brick and Wonder team back in New York does all of the organizational work in the back end, in the background, all the kind of communication and organization associated with putting the programming together. And ultimately, the leader of the community, say in Austin, comes to the events and is positioned as a leader in these events to kind of explain to everybody how it works and take everybody through and keep everybody on track. And they're a leader, they're a local ambassador, if you will, and they're positioned in a way where that's something that they want to do. In the case of Austin, it was actually a member who moved from New York to Austin. She came to us and she said, I'm moving to Austin. I don't want to lose my connection to the Brick and Wonder community, at which point we got to the place in the conversation where we realized, okay, she may be a really great fit as the local leader and ambassador for the Austin community. And that's how it started, and that's how it continues. And, why did it make sense for her? I mean, it's different in the case of every city. For her, new city, professionally speaking, she's a real estate strategist. She works kind of across real estate development projects of different sorts. And she kind of straddles the world of brand and marketing and the world of business business development as it pertains to real estate, and positioning real estate development projects for markets for sale. And, she worked with big developers in New York inside their companies, and she went out on her own and started her own agency, and that continues in Austin. And she still works with her clients in New York and all over the country, but she wanted and needed to develop a vibrant community in Austin, and she sees Brick and Wonder as a vehicle for her to do that, a kind of on ramp and a way of leapfrogging, and that term leapfrogging is one we use all the time because we think of Brick and Wonder as a vehicle for everybody to leapfrog where they want to go, kind of no matter where they're coming from as they enter into and participate with the Brick and Wonder community, kind of like skipping some steps that you would otherwise have to take. I mean, we all know what it's like to reinvent the wheel, and slog through figuring out how to go where we want to go. And, wouldn't it be better to just be able to tap people who have the know-how and the resources and, also the energy and the enthusiasm that can just help take you there because they know how to do it and you don't have to figure it out. It's, she's plugging into that with respect to, where she was at a certain point in time. And she happened to be going to Austin. That's why Austin. And similar sort of thing happened with San Francisco and the starting of the community there and in London. And
gotcha.
And like it just hasn't happened in Philadelphia, which is surprising, yet that's the way it's gone. So same thing with Boston, in Philadelphia and Boston, of course, makes sense. They're proximate to, New York, regionally speaking, and so, maybe those made more sense. Even Chicago is closer, and we have community members in all these places, and of course, groups will begin convening, and the community will begin growing more vibrantly when it's meant to happen. We grow organically. We grow relatively slowly. Really, no more than 5 to 10 new members join a month. That's the cadence of growth. The growth is...
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, though. Yeah.
Yeah, no. We've grown a lot. We've grown...
Wait, so I want to ask you, you're about 300 people or so, but I was super curious to know what the vetting process is like. Like, people submit an application, there's some, I assume, whoever's on that committee, you look at their website, their work. Do you interview them? Is there an interview that takes place?
Yeah. That's the main part of the vetting. I mean, look, like I said, most people come to us, at least so far, through other members. And so that vetting is, of course, by its nature, much easier. It's
sure
members who are vouching for these people, recommending that they're joining Brick and Wonder because they think they're fit. And so, that the vetting process for those folks is much quicker, much easier. For people who are coming to us cold, it's just a longer process. And I mean, it goes exactly as you would imagine. We're talking to them, we're feeling them out, we're asking them a very specific set of questions, draw them out in a way where we can understand their values and how they're coming to us, and if they're open to the Brick and Wonder approach. And so they can self-select in or out. And usually that's what happens, and we're usually not turning people away, which is, I think, a good thing. And of course feels better. The thing that happens that's the closest to turning people away that feels yucky, but I think is also positive as well, is we put some people who are qualified onto a waiting list. And there's certain categories that have longer waiting lists than others. And the reason we do that is because, it's important from our perspective and part of our job to keep the community in balance. So while we want positive competition, there's a tipping point at which the competition becomes unhealthy. So one of the categories that's not overpopulated yet, but at the kind of edge, where we
Mm-hmm.
have a long waiting list is general contractors, and it's high-end residential general contractors more than others.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're clamoring to be
Yeah.
in the community. For a time, there was a long list, a waiting list of architects. We've had waiting lists of real estate developers.
Yep.
We've had waiting lists in the investor category, real estate investors. And, interior designers is another quite, populated professional category. And then the other category that's populated, where there are tensions that have threatened to become unhealthy, are tensions in the materials and supply space. So for instance, if it can happen with wood flooring, right? Like there are many wood flooring suppliers, and plenty of buildings to kind of buy and sell and into with respect to wood flooring. I mean, wood flooring is, it's a massive part of our industry. It's that where there's plenty of space. However, people operate in a way where they're providing similar wood flooring product in the same geography. In our case, it's been New York City, or, New York metro area, where we felt these tensions. We feel like we can only have so many of those vendors who can be meaningful participants, where they're both giving and receiving value and feel comfortable doing so, including the giving part. We don't want people to feel constrained extending value to other people. We don't want people holding their cards close to their chest, which is what most of us do when we're kind of scared, and we take on a mindset of scarcity, and don't know where our next meal is coming from, and so forth. So yeah, I mean, that's how the vetting takes place and the application process.
It's interesting. I mean, I can see the challenges for you, and from like the leadership perspective of how do you invite a variety of professionals, because you want that. That's part of what makes it healthy and work, but also you can't just open the floodgates entirely, because it would turn into a shit show. And there's definitely, architects tend to be, for better or worse, kind of at the top of the food chain in a lot of cases. Like the contractors, for the most part, get work from the architects. Historically, interior designers from architects. That's shifted now a little bit. Certainly any material supplier, like the architect is kind of the person. And it's a very difficult, I will say it's a very, very difficult and weird thing to know if someone who you're speaking with, who could get something from you clearly, if their intentions in the conversation or them being there is truly just because they want to be there, versus they have an ulterior motive. I mean, everyone wants business, as you said. That's normal. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but yeah, it's hard to know sometimes. Like, are you here for the long game, in that you're just waiting for something, or are you actually engaged and involved? You like being with people to talk about these things? It's sometimes hard to figure out.
It is. But the I don't know. We rest easy, knowing some mistakes will be made. Some people kind of come into the community or not meant to be part of the community, and we're and some people are going to have bad experiences. I mean, it's happened so seldom. We've been really, really fortunate. But the good news is that when it happens, and there is it's basically a system of accountability. I mean, everybody who's in the community is accountable to one another, and as a result, it's they're beholden to each other, and they behave better. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, it's if someone does wrong by a fellow member, then not only is the member they're working with going to work with them again, but no one else is either. You know, it's take long to understand the way people operate and their value set. And like I said, people largely self-select in and out. That's how it works, and it really largely takes care of itself.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Real quick, I wanted to know how this whole thing started. So it started in 2020, I believe. How did it work? Did you have this idea to create a network, and what do you do after that?
Yeah.
I think it was smart, super smart, by the way, to use an existing software infrastructure, let's call it, as opposed to try to create your own. I've had friends who try to do that, and it's like that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, I mean, I have to confess that in the beginning, we made a lot of mistakes. I mean, so many, the list is too long to convey. But one of the mistakes we made is we actually did try to build our own software.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. I mean, and we were really lucky to survive doing that, because we all hear war stories, just horror stories about people doing themselves in, trying to do that. And we were among the people who nearly, died. Fortunately, we kind of nearly died and then, reinvented ourselves. So we've pivoted several times from the beginning, but the problem that I had, for a lot of my early career, was the set of problems that, we set out to solve when starting Brick and Wonder. I mean, I started Brick and Wonder to solve the problems that I had and that I had confidence a lot of other people had. Confidence because I heard about these same sort of grumblings from my colleagues, but also just had this innate sense. Anyway, the problem was a people problem. I mean, it was, I just consistently had projects go wrong. And it had everything to do with just bad actors in projects. And, you do your best to try and choose good people to work with. You get the best kind of references and recommendations that you can. But it always seemed to, in too many instances, fall short and, devolve into some version of a disaster, and not just a lack of joy in the work, but, just an absolutely miserable set of experiences. And, of course, architecture, construction projects are long, so it's, I was beside myself. I mean, I didn't know what to do. I felt like, well, maybe I just have to come to terms with this. It's just how it is. And if I want to practice architecture and realize the kind of things that I want to realize, this is what I have to endure. I have to kind of just endure, these bad experiences. And of course, I didn't have them on every project, but I had them way too often, and so it's, Brick and Wonder is set up to solve this, I call it the collaboration problem. And it's a who problem, like who are you going to work with and who you're not going to work with. It's this filter for me and everybody else who's a participant. And, I think of myself as a member, just like everybody else. I'm an equal together with them. I have the same problems and the same needs and desires that they do. I also had the sense that I not only have this problem, but I really like extending value to other people, right? Like I just get a lot of satisfaction from introducing good people to each other and seeing them succeed. So I'm like, how can I just create a framework, a formal framework that makes it easier to do that. And sure enough, in this framework, it's much easier than it was for me before because I know that there's a built-in system of accountability and trust.
Right.
Because
Right.
when you introduce colleagues to each other, um, you know, and say you refer a colleague to a client, you refer a kind of long-time trusted colleague over to another colleague, like putting a lot at stake. You're putting yourself and your reputation at stake. Needless to say, we all do that. We all know what that's like. And needless to say, one of the reasons why people are so siloed and fearful and naturally go to a mindset of scarcity is because of this. Like the downside risk is too great, and so we're mitigating that. We're solving that problem too, and like these are big gnarly problems, and we're solving them. Like that's why I started Brick and Wonder. So I don't know. I mean, do you have some of these problems I'm describing?
We, of course, we all do, in particular when it comes to finding good people to work with. And even if you found it, I'm thinking of consultants, even if you have them in your Rolodex, you can't always use them because of timing, budget, clients not matching with them. Oftentimes it's just timing. They happen to be busy with other stuff. But we've been pretty good, I would have to say, for at least being aware of these things. And in part, we're aware of these things because we talk to a lot of people through the show. So kind of circling back to what you were saying about being reminded of stuff, it's a nice little refresher, every few weeks to talk to somebody and get outside of our own headspace and be like, oh yeah, this was something that is important. Or yeah, I thought about that, but it's been 6 months since we've implemented it. So it's similar to you, actually, the podcast, like you said, you're kind of you view yourself as a member of Brick and Wonder. We're equally just an absorber of content in the recordings. Although sometimes I think we're too wrapped up in the moment of trying to somewhat be coherent and ask questions that I actually am not paying attention to what's being discussed as much as I should be. But anyway, we're running up on the hour. The last question we always ask, which is a total pivot from this last most of our conversation, but it's fine. I still want to ask it, is what is your favorite building?
It changes. Because I was just in Copenhagen, at the moment, it's the Louisiana Museum.
The Louisiana
Museum. And what's funny is I don't even know who the architect is. And I didn't even think until now to look it up. I actually think, I'm actually fairly certain, just having experienced the building, that it was a whole series of architects who worked on it over time. Because there's a historic building center, and then a series of more modern additions. And, it was someone's house, who was an art collector, and it's become a museum that displays their art collection. And, there's of course a foundation that has organized this and supports it. And it's just this incredible series of buildings, series of pavilions set in an extraordinary landscape with art interspersed through the landscape and in the buildings, of course. And, it's just a, very thoughtfully designed and positioned cafe and restaurant. I've just never been in a museum where I really wanted to spend an entire day, and I did. And I just I didn't get tired. Like there are different places and moments you can experience indoors and outdoors. It's a wonderful place to eat, it's situated on the sea, I don't know. Put it this way, it's worth the pilgrimage to Copenhagen just to see that building.
Okay. That-
Yeah.
That's a great one because I've not heard of it. I'm definitely going to look it up, and now I have one more reason to visit Copenhagen for sure.
Lots of other
Drew, thank
reasons
you.
to go to
Yeah,
Copenhagen.
I'm sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for making the time on a Friday end of day afternoon for you. This was a lot of fun. It's now happy hour. Appreciate it, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks so much, David, Marina. Really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode. If you want to support the show, then you can leave us a review in the Apple Podcast app. You can also find us on Spotify and YouTube.
We're on social media, mostly Instagram, and the handle is Second Studio Pod. We also have the website, secondstudiopod.com, where you can find all of the episodes, some work images of our guests, transcript, and a lot more. What else? We have the hotline, 213-222. You can send a text.
Wait, what? Say it again?
We also have the hotline,
222-6950. We do have that hotline where you can call and it'll go to voicemail, or you can send a text message if you prefer to reach out that way. Thanks, everyone, for listening. More guests coming up, a lot of great guests coming up, good topics, etc., etc. Talk soon. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.